Today, we're digging into some really massive changes coming out of Washington, shifts that are reshaping American policy pretty dramatically, from the border to the economy, even what we call our military.
Absolutely. It's quite a landscape right now.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your sources, articles, research, notes, all that stuff, and we pull out the key insights to help you get properly informed. We try to find some surprising facts, maybe a little humor, too.
It seems interesting.
Exactly. So this deep dive, we're looking at a bunch of recent sources that really detail the Trump administration's, well, assertive policies and the political fallout.
hmm We're talking significant moves on immigration enforcement, economic strategy, even, as you said, rebranding the Department of Defense.
Our goal here is to walk you through these developments. We'll look at the key actions, the criticisms that are flying around, and, the facts as presented in the sources.
Yeah, we'll cover the headlines about the federal immigration crackdown, some pretty controversial economic moves, and this idea of redefining the military's posture.
And really, what seems to be underpinning all this, at least according to our sources, is this fundamental rethinking of federal power, how far it reaches into American life.
It's a big theme running through all of this.
So just this week, the headlines have been pretty intense. You've got the White House pushing this big rebrand for the Department of Defense.
Right, planning to rename it the Department of War by Friday. The stated goal is apparently restoring a, quote, warrior ethos.
At the same time, immigration enforcement is ramping up significantly. We're seeing federal resources deployed, even a Navy base near Chicago approved for ICE operations.
And that's really stirring up debate, right, about sanctuary states and accusations of abuse of power, big clashes there.
Then on the economy, there's this Intel deal, the government taking a, 10% equity stake?
Yeah, in exchange for GPS Act money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's drawn serious fire from conservatives, some calling it straight-up socialism.
So these moves, taken together, they signal a really forceful redefinition of federal power. It's touching everything: national security, economic liberty, individual rights.
It really is. So today, we're going to try and cut through the noise, look at the documents behind these headlines, and show you what's actually happening and why it matters.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with changes to federal institutions themselves. The sources point to a real effort to redefine core government roles, beginning with something pretty symbolic, but, significant.
Yeah, it's definitely noteworthy. I mean, it goes way beyond just swapping names on a building. President Trump's plan, set for this Friday, September 5th, is an executive order
Right.
to rebrand the Department of Defense as the Department of War. And as places like Fox News, Politico, The Wall Street Journal are reporting, his argument is, and this is a quote, "Everybody likes that we had an unbelievable history of victory when it was Department of War."
So it's framed as looking back, but also
Also about restoring this warrior ethos, as they put it. It signals maybe a more direct, more assertive approach to how America projects power globally.
And our sources are showing these shifts aren't just about the nameplate, right? There are real defense policy changes with global implications tied into this.
Absolutely. The administration is also planning, according to Reuters and the Financial Times, to cut some security funding for European countries that border Russia.
Okay.
And maybe even more significantly, for months now, the Pentagon has reportedly blocked Ukraine from using its long-range missiles for strikes inside Russia.
Wow, limiting a key weapon in their fight.
Exactly. It's not just a small tactical tweak. It really suggests a major reevaluation of how the U.S. uses its power, how it supports allies, how it manages conflicts. Some sources hint it might mean a more, unilateral or maybe transactional approach.
So if we pull back and look at the big picture here, renaming the Pentagon, tweaking defense aid, limiting what allies can do, what does this all tell us about the scope of federal power and national security? What's the underlying philosophy the sources suggest might be driving this? Maybe something different from, say, traditional conservative foreign policy ideas?
Well, the core idea seems to be this bold reimagining of America's role in the world, a more assertive, direct federal approach. The sources keep highlighting this shift towards what you could maybe call a more nationalistic, less internationally integrated defense strategy.
So less about alliances, more about direct U.S. interest.
Potentially. It seems less focused on maintaining the existing global order and more about directly asserting American interests, even if that means, challenging some long-standing diplomatic or strategic norms. It's a clear message. This administration plans to wield federal power more explicitly, both in symbols and in practice on the world stage.
And this assertive stance globally seems mirrored at home, especially around immigration. That's an area where we're seeing intense clashes between states and the federal government. Let's get into how our sources show these showdowns playing out.
Yeah, the administration is definitely pushing stricter immigration measures, often clashing head-on with state policies. We saw it clearly in that Republican-led House Oversight Committee hearing.
Right, the one challenging these sanctuary state governors.
Exactly. Committee members accused those governors of, quote, willfully ignoring a federal law and pushing costs onto taxpayers. You had governors like Tim Walz from Minnesota, J.B. Pritzker from Illinois defending their policies. Governor Walz actually pushed back hard on even using the label sanctuary state for Minnesota.
So what are some of the concrete federal actions fueling this? And what are the critics saying about potential overreach?
Well, they're deploying significant federal resources, the National Guard, for instance. And a really striking example from the sources is the Pentagon approving that Navy base near Chicago.
As a staging ground for ICE.
Yeah, for expanded ICE operations. And that move alone caused a huge backlash. California's Governor Gavin Newsom, Senator Alex Padilla, they called it a military dragnet.
Arguing it went beyond targeting criminals.
Right. They said it goes well beyond his stated intent to just go after violent and serious criminals and affects everyone from farm workers to cooks to day laborers. And Senator Padilla himself, just this week, September 4th, was reportedly forcibly removed and handcuffed at a Homeland Security press conference in L.A.
Wow.
And then you had Governor Walz of Minnesota making that really controversial comparison, likening ICE agents to a modern-day Gestapo. Strong words.
Our sources do note that Republicans are focusing on, quote, the worst of the crimes committed by illegal immigrants, framing it as something that wouldn't have happened without sanctuary policies. What do the sources say about the administration's stated priorities versus public perception?
That's key. The administration's stated priority was explicitly the removal of illegal immigrants with a focus on dangerous gang members and others accused of crimes. Public opinion, according to the sources we looked at, seems to be, for now, giving Mr. Trump the benefit of the doubt to fix the problem.
Largely due to the previous administration's handling of the border.
That seems to be the context, yeah. But the sources also caution this support could erode quickly if things like family separations were to happen again. It's a very sensitive area for public opinion.
And this push isn't just about raids, is it? It goes further.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, they're not just hiring armed special agents. But the Wall Street Journal and Newsweek report, they also plan to make the U.S. citizenship test more difficult.
Okay.
And then there was that claim from Trump about the U.S. attacking a Venezuelan gang in the Caribbean, killing 11, saying it would make cartels think twice. Very assertive.
And that idea from Governor Noem?
Yeah, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem suggested using a Louisiana penal colony to, quote, foment auto-deportation. Basically, make conditions so tough that undocumented immigrants choose to leave on their own.
So, taken together, these actions really show a comprehensive, aggressive federal strategy on borders and immigration, raising big questions about federal power versus individual rights.
Definitely. It's a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, let's pivot to the economy. Here, too, our sources show an administration that's not shy about intervening in markets, often in ways that really stir the pot on both sides.
Yeah, that Intel equity deal is a perfect example. Caused quite a stir. The administration announced it would swap CHIPS Act grants. You know, the money meant to boost U.S. chip making for a 10% equity stake in Intel.
Which immediately got pushback from free market folks.
Big time. Conservatives, free market advocates were highly critical. Michael Strain, a Financial Times columnist, called it a threat to U.S. economic liberty. Senator Rand Paul was even more blunt, labeling it socialism with an R next to its name.
Arguing government control of production.
Exactly. His quote was, socialism is literally government control of the means of production. And the sources really highlight this as a major departure from traditional conservative economic thinking about the government's role in private business.
But it's not all intervention, is it? There's a deregulatory side, too. Seems like a balancing act.
That's true. It creates this interesting tension. For example, the administration scrapped a Biden-era plan that would make airlines give cash compensation to passengers for flight disruptions the airlines caused.
Okay, so easing rules on airlines.
Right. That aligns with a deregulatory approach, definitely helps the airlines, but it also shifts that financial risk back onto travelers, so it shows they're selective about where they intervene.
And what about tariffs? That's been such a signature policy, consistently controversial in our sources.
Right. President Trump consistently argues that widespread tariffs are, quote, necessary to avoid an economic catastrophe and to protect U.S. industries.
But they face challenges.
Constantly. Legal challenges, some going all the way to the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
and tons of criticism from industry groups, especially food and agriculture, pointing to rising costs, loss of competitiveness.
Any specific examples?
Well, Deere & Co., the farm equipment giant, reportedly took an earnings hit, laid off workers. Some sources directly tied that to the impact of tariffs. And you had former Senate leader Mitch McConnell making that stark comparison, likening this fixation with tariffs to the isolationist policies of the 1930s, arguing they're just damaging trade barriers.
So these debates really show a fundamental split, don't they, on what's best for the U.S. economy's health and freedom?
Absolutely. Deep disagreements there.
Now let's dive into finance, investor protection, market structure. Our sources revealed quite a bit about these intense debates over payment for order flow, PFOF, and a potential financial transaction tax, or FTT.
Yeah, these are pretty technical but have big implications.
For anyone following markets, PFOF isn't new, but the sources show renewed focus on potential conflicts of interest and how it might affect everyday investors getting the best execution. What's the core issue there?
Okay, so PFOF, payment for order flow, is where brokers get paid by third-party market makers for routing your trades to them. Critics, like Professor Gina Gale Fletcher, say this creates a really clear conflict of interest.
Because the broker might prioritize getting paid over getting you the absolute best price.
That's the argument. Professor Fletcher worries it compromises best execution. And you have others like Rachel Robasciati saying PFOF should be banned, absolutely. She points out the UK and Australia have banned it and claims it led to better execution for retail investors at the best price. The tension is really market efficiency versus genuine investor protection.
But there are strong arguments against an outright ban too, right? What are the potential downsides mentioned?
Oh, definitely. Commissioner Michael Pablewar, for instance, strongly urges caution. He says banning it without proper study could just push us back to commission-based trading.
So just swapping one cost for another?
Potentially, yeah. And he argues it might just shift the conflict of interest rather than get rid of it. He also points out that front-running trading ahead of client orders is already illegal, so the focus should be on enforcing existing rules.
And his view on the current market for retail investors.
He argues retail investors have actually never had it better, low costs, easy access. He worries that a big government ban could actually limit her access to and choices in the stock market. His perspective is that the current system provides huge benefits that could be lost.
Okay, then there's this other big idea, the financial transaction tax, the FTT. What are the arguments for and against that, based on our sources?
Proponents, like Senator Van Hollen, suggest a tiny tax, maybe 0.1% on each trade. They argue it could discourage excessive high-frequency trading, maybe reduce volatility, and bonus generates significant government revenue.
And they say the impact on the average person would be small.
Yeah, they claim the cost would be very negligible for an average investor, maybe $9 per trade if you make 20 trades a year. So targeting speculative trading, not long-term investing.
But Commissioner Pewar has a very different take.
A very different take. Citing research he did for President Obama's advisors, he warns an FTT would have, quote, disastrous consequences. He thinks it would seriously hurt market quality, harm businesses by making capital more expensive, and ultimately lower GDP and living standards.
And not just for big traders?
No, he specifically says it would hit retirement funds, 529 college savings plans, ABLE plans for people with disabilities. So a much broader negative impact than proponents suggest.
What's really striking in all this is how differently people see the stock market itself, who benefits, how fair it is. What do the sources say about that?
Yeah, it raises fundamental questions. On one hand, you have the argument that fintech, trading apps and stuff, has democratized finance.
Yeah.
There's data suggesting the racial gap in individual stock ownership has halved in just a few years.
But others strongly disagree.
Right. Figures like Senator Sherrod Brown argue the market is detached from the economy and basically rigged against the little guy. They point to stats showing the wealthiest 1% own about 53% of stocks, while the bottom 90% own less than 12%. A huge imbalance.
And research suggests stocks aren't the main wealth builder for most.
According to Dr. Teresa Ghilarducci's research, most Americans build wealth through home equity and Social Security, not really direct stock trading. She also highlights lack of access to workplace retirement plans as a key driver of the racial wealth gap, a systemic issue.
And, ironically, even Pewar sees barriers.
Yeah, Commissioner Pewar criticized the accredited investor rules, the rules defining who's allowed to invest in certain private deals, saying they actually worsen inequality by locking out lower-income investors, even if they're knowledgeable. So both sides see fairness and access problems, but their solutions are poles apart.
It really brings up that core tension. Is just giving people direct stock access the best way forward, or do we need more guidance, more protection to really make things fair?
A crucial question.
Okay, moving beyond markets and trade, this administration's assertive approach digs deep into social and cultural issues, too. It's taking a firm federal stance that's definitely causing controversy. Let's shift focus there.
Right. Our sources show the Trump administration is actively pursuing policies on transgender rights, really marking a significant federal intervention. A top priority seems to be to remove transgender athletes from girls' sports.
We saw that with the education department.
Exactly. Citing Title IX's the law against sex discrimination in federally funded schools, they found Maine's education office in violation for letting transgender girls compete, and they threatened to pull federal funding if Maine doesn't comply.
And this followed a direct clash.
Yeah, between President Trump and Maine's Governor Janet Mills, where Trump reportedly said, "We'll see you in court." And related to this, the administration also reportedly laid off about half the staff at the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights.
Which is the office usually tasked with protecting these rights.
Precisely.
Are there other significant federal actions being considered in this area?
Well, the Justice Department is reportedly looking at ways to ban transgender Americans from owning guns. One potential avenue mentioned is labeling them mentally defective, apparently brought up after the Minneapolis Catholic Church shooting. These are really assertive federal actions on highly sensitive social issues, aiming to define and regulate identity rights nationally.
And our sources also capture the pushback, right? Criticisms from groups like GLA targeting specific figures, highlighting these intense cultural debates.
Yes, absolutely. Gorland, for example, criticizes Abigail Schreier, the Wall Street Journal columnist. They point to her statements questioning transgender women in bathrooms, her claims that rising trans identity in teens is an expression of undiagnosed mental health disturbance, and her framing of trans rights as a war on women.
Who else did Gliad mention?
They also noted Richard Grinnell, who reportedly called Pride events embarrassing, and Pete Hegseth, who, while at the Navy, ordered the renaming of the USNS Harvey Milk, a ship named for California's first openly gay elected official. It really paints a picture of strong opinions and direct actions clashing over these deeply personal and politically charged issues.
Okay, and finally, just to round out social policy and federal oversight, let's touch quickly on those vaccine policy debates.
Right. The administration's HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., faced some really intense questioning in a Senate hearing just on September 4th. It was about his views on vaccines and the ongoing turmoil at the CDC.
And involved the former CDC director.
Yes, Susan Monterez, who Kennedy fired after only 29 days. She publicly accused him of pressuring her to approve recommendations from an anti-vaccine panel.
How did Kennedy respond?
He denied it. He stated his goal was to restore the CDC to a gold standard, arguing that America did worse than any country in the world in COVID-19 deaths under previous leadership. It just underscores these ongoing, very contentious debates about public health, federal agency roles, and public trust in science, all clearly laid out in sources.
Wow, what an incredible range of policy shifts, controversies we've managed to cover today. I mean, from renaming the Department of Defense, aggressively enforcing immigration, intervening in tech, debating financial markets, taking firm stands on social issues. The sources really paint this picture of a government actively trying to redefine its role and priorities.
Yeah, this deep dive really shows how all these decisions coming from the top are interconnected and can profoundly impact things like economic liberty, national security, individual rights.
Yeah.
And the debates we've seen, like the clash over the Intel deal or the FTT, they just highlight these fundamentally different, often conflicting visions for the country's future and how much power the federal government should have.
And for you listening, the implications are just huge. Whether it's tariffs potentially hitting your wallet, border security debates, the way financial markets are structured, or even how individual rights are defined, these policies ripple out into almost every part of daily life.
It touches everyone in some way.
So here's something to think about. As federal power pushes into so many areas of American life, redefining norms, sometimes challenging even traditional conservative ideas about limited government, what, if anything, is truly left outside its reach? And what might be the long-term consequences for individual freedom and economic prosperity?